section, in this part of the chapter, we will discuss basically about the different methods of measurement, how we measure the quantities. Okay, so yes, once again, in this chapter we will discuss about the different methods of measurement of various quantities, and we will start with length. How we measure the length. So we have few direct methods and indirect methods. Direct methods like use of meter scale. We use a meter scale that can measure. It is appropriate to measure from 1 millimeter to 100 meter. Okay. Right. So indirect methods, one is using a meter scale that can which is appropriate to measure the lengths from 1 millimeter to 100 meters. Then we have a instrument named as vernier calipers. Next is vernier calipers. This is again a kind of instrument which is used to measure the small lengths. Okay, and it can measure up to 10 raised power -4 meters. Right? Then we have a screw gauge. Screw gauge or spirometer. We have two more instruments. One is a screw gauge, one is a spirometer, and they can measure up to 10 raised power -5 meters. Okay, 10 raised power -4 meter is how much? It is 0.1 millimeter, right? And this is 0.01 millimeter, right? So means the use of vernier calipers, screw gauge, and spirometer, they are included in your syllabus also in the that practical part. Means in experiments in your practical section, you will come to know this year that how a vernier calipers is used, how screw gauge and spirometers are used to measure the small lengths, right? So these are few direct methods to measure the length. Now we have some indirect methods also. Indirect methods. Where we will use indirect methods? Where the application of direct method is not possible. Okay, the conditions in which it is difficult to apply the direct methods, we go for indirect methods. Suppose we want to find out the distance of Mars from Earth, or the distance of Moon from the Earth, or distance of Sun from the Earth. So in such type of cases, it is not possible to measure directly. So we go for the indirect methods. And in indirect methods, we have we are first discussing for the large lengths. First of all, with the help of indirect method, we are measuring for measurement of large length. We have a method called as parallax method. Parallax method, basically used for astronomical distances. Astronomical means related to heavenly bodies. Basically, this method is used to measure the distance of astronomical bodies. Now, how this method is used, that I will discuss with you now. Suppose this is Earth. Now from two different points on the Earth, suppose A and B, and we want to find out, suppose, the distance of Moon from the Earth. Then we choose 2 points on the surface of Earth. On Earth we take 2 points and we measure the distance between the 2 points. Okay, this distance will be approximately equal to this distance. It means you are going to choose a distance of sufficient means 2 points of sufficient distance, appropriate distance, means the points should not be very close, right? So from these 2 points we measure we look at the moon and we find out this angle theta. Okay, now if suppose this distance is L, then I told you earlier also that since these heavenly bodies are at a large distance from Earth, so in those cases this angle theta becomes very small, and when this angle theta becomes very small, then you can replace this length by this length, means the length of the arc becomes the shortest distance itself. So you can apply here. Now this distance is suppose D, right? Since this angle is very small, so this just a minute, you want to find out this distance, the distance of the moon from the Earth, right? Now since this angle is very small, so this distance will be approximately equal to this distance only, right? I can give you an example. Suppose angle is more, you can see that this distance and this distance, they have a difference. This is smaller, this is larger. Now suppose I decrease this angle, I decreased, right? Now you again draw a perpendicular. Now again you can say that this is smaller, this is larger, but now the difference between them is small. They don't differ by much magnitude. Now I even decrease that angle. This is my angle, and now if I draw a perpendicular in between like this, now you cannot say that whether this one is more or this one is more, or rather you will say that they both are of equal length. Okay, so when you have a heavenly, when you are measuring a astronomical distance, in that case this angle is generally so small that both this and this, they both become equal. And so you can say that this distance itself is the distance of the moon from the Earth approximately. So now you use that formula, theta equals to L upon R. Now you know this L because this is a distance on the Earth's surface, and you can measure the distance between any 2 points on the Earth. So you can measure it directly. Then you can, if you know this length, then this R is replaced here by D. So D is equal to L upon theta. So if you have L, you have theta, you can find the distance of the moon from the Earth. This is a method. This method is called as parallax method because the angle here is called as parallactic angle. Parallactic angle. Okay, or simply the parallax. This angle is called as parallax angle or parallactic angle, and that is why the method is called as parallax method. Okay. Now there are few limitations of this method. General limitation is that most of the time this angle is so small that it becomes difficult to even to get a appropriate value. You do not get a sufficient value. Means the magnitude is not sufficiently large as required. Means generally how much this angle comes out to be 0.000 and something like suppose degrees. Now the angle is so small that it becomes difficult to observe these values, means to get the angle. Observation of parallactic angle itself becomes very difficult because the value is so small. So now what we do, how we can increase that angle? Okay, before increasing the angle, let me, there can be a question that how can you measure the angle on the moon, because you cannot go on the moon, so how you will measure this angle theta? So for that I will tell you one method. Suppose this is a point A, this is another point B, and this is the moon. Now what you do, with the help of clinometer, you look at the moon and find out the angle made by the clinometer with the vertical. Okay, suppose it is theta by 2. Now you go to the place
Sir,
B.
please repeat, sir.
Huh?
Sir, please repeat.
From where?
So from here only.
Here
A
only.
point and B point.
Okay, and I will repeat once again. Right? You do. See, what I am discussing here is there can be a question when I was discussing this method. Then there will be a question that how can you measure the angle on the moon? You cannot go to the moon, so how you will measure angle theta? As I told you that if you know L, if you know theta, you can find the value of D, the distance of the moon from the earth. That was my point. So I was discussing that how can you measure that angle on the moon without going to the moon itself. So the method is you suppose your first observation point is A. From A, with the help of clinometer. Have you seen clinometer in mathematics? You must have gone through that. The word clinometer, it is a device which is used to measure the angles of depression and elevation in trigonometry. So that with the help of clinometer, you can look at the moon from the place A and find out the angle made by the clinometer with the vertical. Suppose it is theta by 2. Okay? Or suppose no need to take it as theta by 2. You can take any value. Suppose it is x. Okay? You measured the angle made by clinometer with the vertical, and let us suppose that that angle is x. Now you go to the point B and look at the moon, and again find the angle made by the clinometer with the vertical. Okay? Now you can measure this distance L, because they are the 2 points on the earth itself. Now if this angle is y, suppose I draw a perpendicular from here. If this angle is y, how much will be this angle? Y, because of alternate angles, right? And if this angle is x, this is also x. So how much is theta? Theta equals to x plus y. It means that for measurement of theta, you are not required to go on the moon. From the earth itself, you can measure that angle. Which angle? Parallax angle, right? So now you have theta equal to x plus y, you have L. Now you can find out D equals to L upon theta. Now you can use this formula. One more thing, theta must be always in radian measure. It should be in radian measure, not degree. Okay? If you are getting if you have your angle in degree measure, then convert it to radian measure. You cannot apply this formula theta equals to L upon R to degree measurement. You can apply it only when the angle is in radian measurement. Okay? So this is the method to find out that angle. Now I'll come back to that point, that the major hurdle in this method is the observation of angle. Generally this angle is so small that it is difficult to even observe that angle. Okay, because the value is so small, so it becomes very difficult to measure the value. So what we do, what we can do here, we will have to increase this angle. And now how can we increase the angle? We will have to increase the distance between the 2 points A and B. Now how can you increase that distance? We can increase that distance in this way. This is your earth. You take one point here and other point here. Now A and B are two diametrically opposite points on the surface of the earth, and now you measure the moon, right, like this. So now this is your angle theta, you can measure by this method, and now L is equal to the diameter of earth, okay, and this is equal to capital D, diameter. Now you can find out D equals to, yes, D upon theta, where capital D is diameter of earth and theta is the parallax angle. Okay, but again, suppose not the moon, you want to measure the distance of Mars, right? Then again, in case of Mars, even after the measurement from two diametrically opposite positions, the angle theta will be very small. Now it means that we need to increase that distance once again. Now how can you increase that distance further? But are you getting it? Are you getting my what I am trying to tell you?
Yes, sir.
Right? So now it means that even for, suppose we want to measure the distance of more distant objects like Mars or Sun, then in that case even this much length will become so small that your angle will be very small to measure. So it means that we need to increase this length once more further. So what we will do, suppose this is sun, okay, and the earth is revolving around the sun like this, okay. What we will do, when the earth is here, we will measure the angle. We will look at the sun and will measure the angle from the vertical. Suppose it is x. Now after 6 months, earth will reach at this point on the orbit, just opposite point. So after 6 months, you again have a look at sun and measure the angle y. Now this length, which is equal to the rate, which is equal to the diameter of earth's orbit, this is your L. Now what is L? L is the diameter of earth's orbit. So it is sufficiently large now. Okay, and this theta can be measured equal to x plus y theta, right? So now you can find out this distance d equals to, suppose this is the diameter of earth's orbit, d upon theta. Now your d is sufficiently large. So how you will make the observation? We will observe that star or sun, we will observe sun once, suppose from a position once from now, and once at this moment, and second observation we will take after 6 months when the earth will be at the diametrically opposite position on the orbit, and then you get the angle, that parallax angle, and use this formula. Now your base is sufficiently large and your angle will become sufficiently large so that you can measure it. Okay, this is your parallax method and the different ways how you apply parallax method to find the distance of heavenly bodies, astronomical, how you find the astronomical distances. Okay, now with the help of this same method, you can find out the diameter of moon and the diameter of other planets also. Suppose this is a point on earth. Now suppose this is the moon. Okay, so from a point you look at this end, and from the same point you look at this end. Okay, now you can measure the angle, because now the angle is on the earth's surface, so you can easily measure this angle. Now you already know that how much is distance of the moon from the earth. Previously you already have obtained this distance. So can you find out this length, which is equal to L? Okay, by using L equals to theta upon d. Now this L is approximately equal to the diameter of the moon. Diameter of moon. So how you get diameter of the moon? Theta upon d. You measure the parallax angle on the surface of earth. You already know by the same parallax method, you already know now that what is the distance of moon from the earth. Use this formula and you can find out the diameter of the moon. By this method, we have roughly found the diameters of all the nearby planets, all the planets of our solar system. If you have any problem, you can ask me now in this parallax method. Students, any doubt, any problem? Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, okay, it's okay if you don't have any doubt now. Okay, yesterday also I didn't upload the video of that lecture, but I have that video recording. So today I will upload the video lecture of yesterday's class, today's class, both. Go through the lecture. If you find any problem afterward, then you can ask me tomorrow, okay, during the class. Means whenever you find a doubt, you can ask me. Yes?
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, right. Now next is indirect method to measure small distances.
Sir, the video of integration also.
But the integration video was actually was not prepared properly, no? So I will have to once again prepare it. But I told you that the major thing you need to know is about the differentiation, and integration is just an opposite process. So there I only discussed majorly about the formulas, and formulas I have given you as notes. So do you want me to prepare another video for integration and then to upload it, or can you manage? If you have any doubt in integration part, you can ask me. Can you manage without video also for integration?
Yes, sir.
Okay, try it out, right? because it will otherwise take another 1 hour for me to prepare that video and upload. So due to some reason I missed that. No problem. If you find any problem, because we need very basic integration in our physics syllabus. We don't need much integration, means complex integration is not required. Okay, so if you find, I have already given you the notes, if you will find any problem during the application of integration in any part, you can ask me, okay, at that time. Okay, all right.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so
Yes,
now
sir.
next is indirect method to measure small distances. Small distances. I'm just giving you examples that what are direct methods, what are indirect methods. In indirect method, I gave you an example for larger distance, that was parallax method. Now, one example for measurement of small distances, right? Now, small distances, suppose you want to measure the diameter of oleic acid molecule. Now you can easily see that the diameter of a molecule is invisible to eyes, okay, and we want to find out the diameter of oleic acid molecule. Okay, so it is going to be a very small distance. Now how to measure that small distance? Indirectly. Indirectly means without using any direct instrument like microscope or anything. Without using that, how can you find the diameter? So I will explain a method, experiment. So there are few steps. First you take 1 cc, 1 cubic centimeter of oleic acid plus you add it to 25 cc of water. You take 1 cc oleic acid, 1 cubic centimeter oleic acid, this is volume, 1 cubic centimeter volume of oleic acid, and you mix it with 25 cc of water. Now you again take 1 cc of this solution. This solution,
Sir?
yes,
What is the meaning of CC, sir?
cc cubic centimeter, beta,
Okay, sir.
right? Cubic centimeter. Centimeter cube we used to say, unit of volume. So 1 cc of oleic acid plus 25 cc of water. You take that solution. Now you again take the 1 cc of this solution, 1 cubic centimeter of this solution, this oleic acid plus water, and you mix it with 20 cc of water, right? So now what is the concentration of oleic acid in this solution, this final solution? Yes, what is the concentration? This solution will have 1 upon 500, yes, cc of oleic acid. Say 1 cc in 25, and then of that part you added it 1 cc to 20. So what is the concentration of oleic acid in this solution? First, initially it was 1 upon 25, and now you took one part of this, you added this 1 cc to 20 cc, so this is 1 upon 25 into 20, so 1 upon 500. Now what is the concentration of oleic acid in this solution after this second step? The concentration of oleic acid is 1 upon 500. Why we have done this? Just to dilute the solution. We want so much dilution, we want a so diluted solution of oleic acid, so that when we pour it inside some broad vessel, we get a single layer of oleic acid. Means, suppose you have a broad vessel, now like this, now you pour this solution inside this, right? So what you will get? You will get a single layer of oleic acid molecules. If the concentration of oleic acids will be more, then either you will need a very broad vessel to get a single layer, or otherwise you will get like this. Your acids will be, means you will not get a single layer. Either you will need a very broad vessel, or otherwise you are not going to get a single layer of oleic acids at the surface. Okay. to get a single layer of oleic acids, we have diluted the solution to this much concentration, 1 upon 500 cc. Okay. Yes. Now what we have done, fourth step is n drops of volume V. 1 drop of capital V volume, and n drops are poured inside it. Which one? This solutions. The solution we have in third step, that solutions, n drops, each of volume capital V is poured inside it. Inside which? The broad vessel. Inside this broad vessel we poured n drops of V volume each, right? And let the solution to settle down, right? Now what happens is that whatever, just a minute, I need to check. Just a minute, I want to repeat this experiment because here is a change. It is not water, it is alcohol. Sorry, ethanol. Ethanol or alcohol. Ethanol is a type of alcohol only. Methanol, ethanol, propanol, they are all alcohols. So the solution is 1 cc of oleic acid with 25 cc of alcohol. Okay. Now 1 cc of this solution to 20 cc of alcohol again, not on water. And why we took alcohol, that also I will tell you. Right. Now this solution will have 1 by 500 cc of oleic acid. Now you pour n drops of this solution to a broad vessel, and what will happen? The oleic acid being lighter in weight, it will form a layer on the top of the alcohol. What will happen to alcohol? Alcohol will evaporate. The boiling point of this means that boiling point of the point of vaporization of alcohol is very low. So when it is exposed to the open atmosphere, it gets evaporated. So the alcohol will evaporate, and what is left there at last? The molecules of oleic acid in a single layer, right? We will have a single layer of oleic acid molecules because all the alcohol molecules will evaporate into the atmosphere. So that's why we took alcohol, not water, because water will not evaporate. Water will not evaporate on its own. You will have to heat it up then to evaporate. But without evaporation, without heating, alcohol will evaporate. So we prepared the solution with alcohol. Right? Now, so we have this type of, let me draw this figure once again. It is like this, and we have a single layer of oleic acids on the surface. Now let us suppose that the diameter of this oleic acid molecule is D. Okay, so you suppose you have taken your vessel, when you will look from the top, suppose it is like this. So what you will see that you have a layer of oleic acids all over the surface. Now you can easily find out the surface area of this oleic acid surface or oleic acid layer. You can find out the surface area by the formula pi r square, or if your vessel is not round, then you can find by other method. Suppose it is rectangular, then L into B, or square, it will be A square. You already know that. So you will have to find out the area of the surface. This, how much is the surface of oleic acid? So you found the area. Okay. So what will be the volume now? Volume of oleic acid is volume of oleic acid equals to A into D, the surface area into the diameter. That will be the volume of oleic acid molecules. Now, how many molecules were there? It was N. What was the volume of each molecule? V. Total molecule of all the N molecules of oleic acid, N into V. And from here it is how much? A into D. Since A into D is also representing the volume of same oleic acid molecule layer, so they must be equal. So from here you can find out D is equal to N into V upon A. Okay, what was N? How many drops you poured inside the vessel? V is the volume of each drop, and A is the area of the surface. How can you find out the area of surface? You can find out with the help of by the method of graph. You can find out, right? With the help of graph paper you can find out. You simply put the graph paper on it. You will get some impressions on the graph paper. You just count the number of boxes. All those boxes which are covered more than half or more than half, you will count them. All the boxes which are covered less than half, you will leave them. So this way you can find out an approximate area of the surface. So this area you can find out, number of drops, volume of each drop. This way you can find out the diameter of the oleic acid, and just half it, you will get the radius of the oleic acid molecule. So this is the indirect method. Now one thing I want to tell you here is that indirect methods generally are not very much accurate. They do not give us an accurate value because we are indirectly finding the values, right? So we don't get an accurate value of the measurement, right? But what we get is an approximate idea, okay? But with the help of direct methods, we get more accurate, I will not say exact values, but more accurate values we get with the help of direct methods. Now, is there any direct method to find out, to measure the small distances? Yes, we have direct methods also. One is optical microscope, use of microscope. In direct methods we have optical microscope. Okay, optical microscope which can measure from 4 into 10 raised power minus 7 meter to it is 8 into 10 raised power minus 7 meters. Up to this much distances it can measure. 4 into 10 raised power minus 7 to 8 into 10 raised power minus 7. Then we have electron microscope also. Electron microscope that can measure up to 0.6 into 10 raised power minus 10 meters. Okay, so it's means the visibility of electron, the measurement of distance is more, means electron microscope can see the objects, the more smaller objects as compared to the optical microscope, right? Okay. So this was about the length. How can we measure the length? Small, large, direct, indirect methods for both of them. Now we move on to the next section, that is mass. How can we measure mass? The methods of measurement of mass. So there is nothing much to discuss. We have mass of two types. One is inertial and other is gravitational. Okay, so inertial and gravitational. Suppose a car is moving with a speed of 100 km per hour and hits a wall, then the damage to the car and the wall will be large. And suppose a bus is moving with a speed of just 1 km per hour and hits the same wall, in that case you can understand that the damage to the wall or the bus will be less as compared to that of car. However, so means what is the difference? The work done by the bus is less than work done by the car. But however, the mass of bus is very much large as compared to the car. The mass of the bus is very large as compared to that of car, but still car is doing more work because the velocity of the car is higher. As a result, its inertial mass is more than the inertial mass of bus, because inertial mass of bus is less, because it was moving just with 1 km per hour speed, whereas the car was moving with a speed of 100 km per hour. So that is that mass possessed by a body due the total amount of inertia of a body due to its motion is called as the inertial mass. And what we include in inertial mass, it is mass as well as the effect of velocity also. So for measurement of inertial mass, we have inertial balance. Inertial balance. This is a device which is that inertial balance, and it works Means this is included in your practicals, so I'm not going to tell you much about right now. There is an experiment to measure the mass, inertial mass of a body. That experiment is included in your syllabus. So there you will come to know about it, how inertial balance works. Then for gravitational mass we have beam balance. Beam balance, right? The ordinary beam balance that we use in our shops everywhere is actually it actually measures the gravitational mass, right? Okay. Alright, now the heavy masses like the mass of sun, stars, planets, they are measured with the help of gravitational method. And light masses, like the mass of an atom or the mass of a molecule, is measured with the help of mass spectrograph. Okay, there is a technique which is called as mass spectrograph, not included in our syllabus. Just for a simple your knowledge, I told you this, that heavy masses we measure with gravitational method and the light masses we measure with mass spectrograph. Okay, then the third is time. How we measure time. And so for measurement of time there is a simple rule that anything that repeats itself, any kind of activity that repeats itself can be used as a device to measure the time. Anything that repeats itself. Okay, like first one is electric oscillator. Now electric oscillator, there is a motor that works on alternating current, AC motor that works on alternating current, and it will again and again repeat its motion, and with the help of that activity you can measure the time. AC motor, a motor works on alternating current. Actually what happens in a motor, suppose this is the pulley of the motor, then for half time period of, suppose there is some time period of alternating current, we can always find out the frequency of the alternating current. Again, I am avoiding to go into the depth of this AC, DC, because all these things are included in your syllabus. So this AC is alternating current. You have a complete chapter in class 12, and without knowing the basics of that alternating current, it is very difficult to explain the things here. But simply I would like to tell you that there is something called as frequency of the alternating current, and that reciprocal of that frequency gives you the time period of alternating current. Time period means, alternating current means it changes its magnitude and its direction with time. For some part of suppose T is the time period of alternating current, then for T/2 time period, alternating current will move in this way, and for next T/2 it will move in the opposite direction. So what will happen, this motor for some time will move like this, and for rest of the half time it will move like this. So it will move this way. It is like a pendulum, like pendulum moves this way. So this way the motor will oscillate, and with the help of that oscillation of the motor you can measure the time. It can work like a pendulum and the time can be measured. So first one is electric oscillator. Okay, then we have a electronic oscillator. And this electronic oscillator, a high frequency radiation is produced through a vacuum tube or a transistor. High frequency radiation. As I told you that frequency can always be related to the time period. 1 over the reciprocal of the frequency gives you the time period. So a high frequency radiation is produced from a vacuum tube or a transistor. Okay, this frequency of the radiation, that frequency, that how many times it oscillates, that frequency per second, how many times it oscillates, that frequency can be used to measure the small time periods, very small time periods. Okay. So this is an electronic oscillator. I'm just trying to give you a superficial knowledge of all these things, not going into the depth, right? And what our theme here is to just discuss that what are different methods of measurement of time. That's all. How they are measuring, that is not our part of syllabus. Now third is solar cell. Solar cell, as we know that Earth revolves around the sun and repeats its motion, so that revolution of Earth can be used for measurement of time. However, that measurement of time with the help of solar, sorry, I wrote this as solar cell. It is not solar cell, it is solar clock. One solar clock is installed in Jaipur. There is a Jantar Mantar. Then in Delhi also there is a Jantar Mantar. They are solar clocks. So with the help of solar clocks also we can measure the time. However, they will not be accurate because Earth revolves around the sun and takes a slightly different time interval. For every revolution, there is always some difference in the time interval. Then the fourth one is quartz crystal clock. Quartz crystal clock. You must have seen in your wrist watches, generally we have a word written on it. You can find out that a quartz word is written on it. Quartz, Q-U-A-R-T-Z. Especially in those watches in which we have a key for the dial. There is a small key on the side of the dial. This is the dial and there is a key here at the side. Those watches are generally the quartz watches, and quartz is nothing but it is actually a kind of mineral. Okay, we get it from Earth's crust. This is a kind of mineral and it is actually SiO2, silicon dioxide in one form. This is a form of silicon dioxide, very much abundant in Earth's crust. What we do here is we use the piezoelectric effect of quartz. What happens is there are two quartz pieces connected like this, and they are connected with a third quartz piece which is perpendicular to both of them. Now with the help of that key, when we give some twist to the key, it actually tightens the spring inside it. You can, if somebody is having an old watch at his home, old wrist watch, how the wrist watches used to work, that we used to twist the key of that watch, and that key used to twist the spring inside it, and that spring applies pressure on these two, you can say these two strips of quartz. When a pressure is applied, a varying pressure is applied on these strips, they generate a EMF. They generate a voltage. Voltage refers to voltage that leads to the production of current. So they generate a voltage. Due to that voltage, this third strip starts oscillating like this. And if oscillation is taking place, then that means you have a phenomena which is repeating itself like this, and that can be used to measure the time. So with the help of this quartz crystal clock and making the use of piezoelectric effect, we can measure the time. That is your quartz clock. Then next is your atomic clock. We have atomic clocks. This is your fifth one. Atomic clock. Works on the vibration produced in CS-133, cesium-133 atom. This is a high energy atom. The vibration, its vibration is happening, and with the help of that vibration is any kind of, that vibration is a motion in which the object repeats itself, its motion actually. That motion is repeated with time, going like this, then coming back, going this, coming back. So any kind of motion which is repeating itself can be used as a device to measure the time. So that is why this vibration of this cesium-133 atom it can be used to measure the time, and that type of clock is called as the atomic clock. Okay, then decay of elementary particles. Decay of elementary particles. This is another method which can be used. It is used to measure the time interval of 10 raised power minus 16 seconds to it is 10 raised power minus 24 seconds. Okay, the decay of elementary particles you will come to know again in your chemistry as well as in physics syllabus in class 12th. There is a chapter named as nuclei, in which we will discuss about the disintegration of the nucleus, radioactivity, and that radioactivity is nothing but the breaking up of the elementary particles. Your protons, electrons, neutrons, they are elementary particles. Your nucleus atom is an elementary particle. Its disintegration, it is also called as decay of nucleus. So decay of that elementary particle can again be used to measure the time interval, and it can measure a time interval of 10 raised power minus 16 seconds to 10 raised power minus 24 seconds. This much small time interval can be measured. There is one more method to measure the time, and that is radioactive dating. Radioactive dating, which is also known as, you must be knowing about the carbon dating. Carbon dating. It is used to measure a long interval of time. A large interval of time is measured with the help of this radioactive dating. It is used to measure long time period of 10 raised power 17 seconds. Okay, with the help of this method, we can measure long time intervals like 10 raised power 17 seconds. It is based on the ratio of radioactive isotope atoms to the non-radioactive form. Every object is having some suppose carbon. There is a carbon, and that is C12 isotope is there, which is actually radioactive. Now that C12 carbon 12 isotope is present in all the living beings, right? Now suppose an object is a very old object is there. Suppose a fossil is there. Now that fossil is having some carbon 12. Now how much carbon 12 initially should be there and how much is present now? With the help of that measurement, we calculate that how much is the life of that fossil. Means when it was present, at what point of time it was present earlier, how many years back it was present. So with the help of that method, we calculate the age of fossils. This is a method called as radioactive dating or carbon dating. Okay. So here in this particular topic, I discussed with you the different methods, direct and indirect, to measure the basic fundamental quantities like mass, length and time. Okay. Only these three quantities, their measurement is included in our syllabus, not other fundamental